Many people in history have crossed the London divide between Arsenal and Chelsea and represented both clubs, including George Graham, Ashley Cole, Cesc Fabregas and Petr Čech, all to varying levels of success. Very few, however, have left a heavy influence on both clubs in the same way forward Ted Drake has. This is a story of the career of 7-star Ted Drake. In 1912, Edward Joseph Drake, better known as Ted, was born in Southampton. He would grow up as a Southampton fan, hoping to follow in the footsteps of their leading striker at the time, Billy Rawlins. Injury ruled Ted Drake out of a trial match with Tottenham Hotspur, but he eventually began his footballing career with non-league side Winchester City, whilst working full-time as a gas meter reader. His goal-scoring exploits there, in which he helped them to glory in the Hampshire Senior Cup, would earn him a move to Southampton at the age of 18. He made his debut for the Saints against Swansea in November 1931 and signed as a professional the very same month. By the end of the 31-32 season, he would have established himself as Southampton's first-choice striker. The following season would be Drake's first full season as a professional, and he would impress, netting 20 goals in the span of 33 games. The skill showed by Drake in this season attracted the interest of legendary Arsenal manager Herbert Chapman, who made an offer to bring Drake to the North London club. But Ted Drake had other ideas, and whilst Arsenal were on course for a top division title, he instead opted to remain at Southampton to continue his development. The next season, he would improve on his goal-scoring feats of his first year, netting 8 goals in the first 5 games, and by March, he would be the second division's top goalscorer, sitting on 22 goals. His form had caught many clubs' attention, and whilst Arsenal were under new management following the death of Herbert Chapman, they had not given up in their pursuit of Ted Drake, and this time they were successful in obtaining his signature for a price of £6,500, which allowed Southampton to cover various debts. New Arsenal manager George Allison proclaimed Ted Drake to be the greatest centre-forward in the world on his arrival, and Drake quickly made good on this high praise, scoring on his debut to help Arsenal to a narrow victory over Wolves. He arrived too late in the season to qualify for a league winners' medal. This was something he would only have to wait another year for. Ted Drake followed Arsenal to the league title in the 34-35 season, with some truly eye-watering goal-scoring feats. He netted 42 goals in the league, scoring 4 goals in 3 separate games, and netting 6 hat-tricks in total. A goal in the FA Cup and 1 in the Community Shield would bring his tally to the season up to 44, a club record that still stands to this day. In the same season, Ted Drake made his debut for England in the Battle of Highbury, a hotly contested game against the reigning world champions Italy. Italian centre-half Louis Monti was left injured just 2 minutes in after a rough tackle by Ted Drake, but he opted to play on, something he could only manage for 15 minutes, during which time England took advantage of the fact that he was Italy's primary defensive cover, with Ted Drake netting on 12 minutes to put a largely inexperienced England side 3-0 up. The Italians repeatedly retaliated against Drake's earlier tackle, and Eddie Hapgood picked up a broken nose for his troubles, whilst Ted Drake was also punched. Giuseppe Meazza scored twice for Italy in the second half, but it would prove that Drake had given England an insurmountable lead in a famous win for the Three Lions. The next season, in 1935-36, Ted Drake would struggle to match the same goal-scoring feats he'd reached the previous year, to the extent that come the mid-season, his place in the side looked to be under threat. He retained his spot in the starting lineup against Aston Villa on the 14th of December at Villa Park. In front of 60,000 spectators, Drake silenced his critics, with a hat-trick to put Arsenal 3-0 up at half-time. By the hour mark, he had added a 4th, 5th and 6th. Aston Villa got a consolation goal back, which was swiftly cancelled out by Ted Drake as he netted his 7th of the game. He thought he'd added another one, claiming his shot had gone over the line after hitting the crossbar, but the referee dismissed his appeals. The full-time whistle soon came, meaning Ted Drake would have to settle for a 7-goal haul. While just 12 days later, Bunny Hall of 3rd Division side Tranmere Rovers would better this with an astonishing 9-goal haul against Oldham Athletic. Ted Drake's tally against Aston Villa remains to this day, the highest haul for a single game in top-flight history. While Arsenal would fail to win a 4th consecutive league title, Ted Drake would score the only goal in that year's FA Cup final win against Sheffield United. 2 seasons later, Drake would net 19 goals, finishing as Arsenal's top goal scorer for a 4th consecutive season as he won his 2nd top-flight title with the club. Over the course of this period, Ted Drake had enjoyed a brief career in cricket. He made his debut for Hampshire around the same time he joined Southampton, making 45 whilst playing alongside cricketing great Phil Mead, who had interestingly also played football for Southampton's first team. He would play 15 games over the next 6 years, even playing professionally at one point. In the 1939-1940 season, back in football, Ted Drake would set another club record, being the quickest player in Arsenal's history to reach 100 goals for the club, completing the feat in just 108 games. In late August, he would score 4 goals for Arsenal against Sunderland. It would sadly, however, prove to be the final hurrah of Drake's career, as the outbreak of the Second World War just days later would see the season abandoned. Over the next 2 years, Ted Drake served in the Royal Air Force, whilst also making appearances for Arsenal in the newly formed Wartime League, also appearing as a guest player for West Ham. Whilst on a personal training course during these years, he picked up a back injury, and when this injury recurred during the return of league football in 1945, Ted Drake decided it was time to hang up his boots. Following the end of his playing career, in which he amassed an impressive 171 goals in 238 total games, Ted Drake wasted little time in getting into coaching. He started near the bottom, taking the reins at non-league side Hendon, and guided them to 9th place in the Athenian League in the 1946-1947 season. At the end of the campaign, he received an offer from Reading, who were in the 3rd division at the time, to take their vacant manager position. He had an amicable spell at Reading, spanning 5 years, in which they finished second in the league twice. However, the fact that only the champions achieved promotion at the time meant that Ted Drake was unfortunately unsuccessful in achieving promotion with the Royals. In 1952, Ted Drake received an offer from top division side Chelsea to become their manager, which he accepted, stating his belief that he'd need just 3 years to win the league. The rivalry between Arsenal and Chelsea was non-existent at the time, meaning there was very little opposition to Drake taking the job. Drake had big ideas for Chelsea, and he brought in sweeping changes upon his arrival. Among his requests were the removal of the Chelsea pensioner from the club badge, and that Chelsea abandon their nickname of the Pensioners, with his aim set in modernising the club. Chelsea became known as the Blues from this point on, and in 1959, the rampant line that we know today was introduced to the club crest. He was dubbed as one of the first tracksuit managers, though this related more to his managerial approach than his actual wardrobe, as Ted Drake usually wore a suit but didn't shy of getting it dirty during training in the name of making a point. He focused on playing with the ball in training rather than running as so many other coaches did, and brought about an overhaul in Chelsea's recruitment strategy, whereby previously Chelsea tended to recruit known stars, many of whom proved to be unreliable. Drake set the sights on lesser known, more reliable players from lower divisions. Drake's impact at Chelsea was not instant, however. The club staved off relegation by a single point in his first season, and they could only reach 8th place in his second. In the 3rd year, they started in similar fashion, opening the season with 4 consecutive losses, the 4th being a 6-5 defeat at the hands of Manchester United. After this though, Drake's methods began to pay dividends. Though there was only one real star in the side in England's international centre-forward Roy Bentley, the largely inexperienced side, which included 2 amateur players, achieved a level of consistency not previously seen at Chelsea, and this was enough to make Chelsea champions for the first time in their history, guiding them to a First Division title that was a shock to everyone. Everyone, that is, that hadn't heard Drake's words 3 years earlier. On the final day of the season, Chelsea received the Guard of Honour from Manchester United's Busby Babes. They would have qualified for the inaugural European Champions Cup the following season, but were dissuaded from participating by the FA, who wished for clubs to focus on their domestic exploits. They weren't able to build on this initial success, but they slumped to 16th place the following season. Ted Drake would remain in the job for the best part of a decade. However, he would largely oversee mid-table finishes in this time. One of the bright spots at Chelsea was the emergence of a series of young players. It became informally known as Drake's Ducklings. Notably included in this group was Jimmy Greaves, who made his debut for Drake's Chelsea side in 1957 and finished as their top scorer that same season. The next year, despite being in good form, Ted Drake dropped Greaves from the side, as he feared the heaps of praise that Greaves was receiving from all sides of football might have been going to the 18-year-old's head. After 6 weeks out of the side, Ted Drake drafted Jimmy Greaves back into the side for a Christmas Day fixture against Portsmouth, feeling him ready to play and Greaves responded in style, netting 4 goals in a 7-4 win. Ted Drake would not experience further success in his time at Chelsea. He saw the results slump in 1961 after star player Greaves was sold to Milan, and he was sacked following a 4-0 loss to Blackpool, which left Chelsea bottom of the table. Not soon after, he took up a role as Vic Buckingham's assistant at Fulham FC before following him to Barcelona a few years later. Drake returned to Fulham in 1970, working as a chief scout, director, and eventually life president of the football club. On the 30th of May, 1995, Ted Drake passed away at the age of 82. Upon his death, he was heralded as the man who transformed Chelsea from a music hall joke into league champions. While Ivan Porting of The Independent wrote, "Throughout more than half a century spent in and around the game, he was modest, cheerful, and unfailingly gentleman." Whilst the 21st century has seen Chelsea hoover up honours following the takeover of Roman Abramovich, none of this would have been possible without the sweeping changes that Ted Drake brought to Chelsea Football Club in the 1950s. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video on the AFC Finners channel. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please have a look at the channel down below and check out the hundreds of videos available. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, you can do so in the link below for as little as £1 a month. Please let me know what you thought of this video and what topic you'd like me to cover next. See you next time.